Hello everyone. If you are new to my channel, then consider liking and subscribing. It will make me feel wonderful if you do it, thanks. By the way, I also have a Luffy fan fiction channel. If you are interested, the link is in the description.
Kitsune of Las Noches by Brown Phantom. Some ninja just get one sensei, and if they're lucky they can get two. Naruto is given 10, a group called the Espada. Armed with training and skills beyond Konoha's understanding, he will take the world by storm. But whose side is he really on? I don't own anything. Adios.
Somewhere off the coast of Land of Whirlpools, Naruto and his team were on a small motorized skiff heading to their destination. Since they still had time before they'd get to their destination, Naruto decided to use that time to give the rundown of what his teammates should expect to deal with. Alright you guys, now that we're far enough from both coasts, it's time I told you what we will be dealing with.
Making sure he had their attention, he pulled out a small scroll and opened it, revealing a map of the Land of Whirlpools, which was comprised of one large island. This is the Land of Whirlpools as it stands now. I'm not going to bore you guys with a long lecture of the history of this place, except to say that this country has had no real government since the collapse of Hagoromo around 20 years ago. For all intents and purposes, it has become a lawless land and a haven for those who need a place to disappear. Which is the most likely reason why Kazuko chose this place as her hideout. Based on the intel we acquired from the scroll, she's located somewhere on the southern half of the island. The southern half? Sasuke asked to clarify what he had heard. Yes, Naruto said with a nod. The intel states that she's clearly residing in the mountains in the southern half of the island.
The northern half of the island is comprised of steep low-lying hills as well as the ruins of Uchiha, while the southern half of the island is one giant mountain range, known as the Uzu no Seabone Whirlpool Spine, with a few small villages scattered throughout the valleys.
Because Uzu no Seabone is filled caves and large underground passages, most of them deserted mines, it makes the area a perfect place to hide. Unfortunately, that also means that we have a lot of ground to cover quickly, both above and under.
Naruto, you've told us about the place we're heading to. What are the most likely dangers that we might encounter while looking for Kazuko? Neji questioned. Well, for starters, there are several large, well-equipped, and very violent groups of bandits and missing nin inhabiting the island. When I say there are villages there, don't think I'm referring to the simple farming or fishing towns you might have seen in past missions. These are makeshift shanty towns, the kind you'd expect to see around before Konoha existed. Filled with people evading the law. Basically, Land of Whirlpools is now in the hands of criminals and pirates instead of Uzumaki.
The others could see the whiskered blonde's ire at what he was saying, and none of them could fault him. His ancestral homeland was now overrun by people who were effectively disgracing it. It would be like if the former Uchiha district was repurposed for Konoha's red light district, or the Hyuga compound was turned into Konoha's garbage dump. Most of them aren't that strong individually, with some inevitable exceptions, but bandits and pirates are known for fighting in groups. As a group, they can be at the level of an elite Junin and have the numbers advantage at the same time. Naruto continued. Not to mention they're going to be more familiar with the environment than we are and likely to set up traps ahead of time. Our advantage in all this is stealth, your Jujutsu, and myself. Are you looking for a fight or to avoid one? Shikamaru asked. Preferably avoid, but in enemy territory no plan lasts long. Now, we're heading for the Uchiha ruins, which is the only real port on the island, and the surrounding hills. The wildlife on the island will give us plenty to eat as we move south into the Seabone.
The mountains are much steeper than the hills around Uchiha and the terrain is very rugged. Landslides and mudslides are a constant risk in the Seabone, and they can get big enough to compete with the Hokage monument collapsing on Konoha. Because of this, the caves and other underground areas are prone to collapse, as well as potential gas explosions and underground floods. The most dangerous aspect of the environment is the weather, since the heat of the day can get scorching and the ocean winds can make the nights freezing. So we may have to go underground more often than we'd like. Why exactly did the Uzumaki live here again? Shikamaru asked, sounding like the whiskered blonde was trying to convince him to venture into hell itself.
Naruto shrugged but grinned. Guess they were just tougher than the Nara clan. Or were they?
The shadow-wielding slacker knew better than to take the bait. Oh, almost forgot. Since this intel was originally meant for the Akatsuki, we have to consider they are still trying to acquire Kazuko's location. Which means that we may have to fight them at some point. If so, just get somewhere safe and leave that to me. Now, due to his training in Hueco Mundo, Naruto could obviously handle these dangers with no real difficulty. But that didn't mean his now gaping teammates felt the same assurance he did. Are you serious, Naruto? Sasuke asked. Naruto simply nodded in response while Shikamaru sighed in exasperation at this and Neji looked on like he was expected the Uzumaki heir to suddenly reveal he had been joking.
So all this is what we have to deal with? This mission's going to be such a drag. Shikamaru groaned, convinced this was going to be a very long mission. Uchiha ruins, the former land of whirlpools, later in the day. We haven't even been here for a few hours and yet we've already had to fight 5 small groups of these bandits. I thought you said they lived in the southern side of the island. Neji said irritably as he and the rest of the group of Konoha nin took a moment to catch their breath after beating back another group of rogue troublemakers inhabiting the island. They're bandits and pirates, do you expect them to be sitting around all day? They get just as bored as we do. Especially when the only people to steal from are other bandits. Naruto replied. Besides, we're already at the edge of the ruins so there's nothing more to complain about. He pointed up ahead towards the steep hills before them. Between them and the impressive mountain range creating the horizon, was Uzumaki. Shikamaru groaned. Great, now we get to the hard part, this is such. If you so much as finish that sentence Shikamaru, you'll wish that last bandit attack did you in. Naruto warned with a smile on his face and a tick above his eye. Shikamaru paled in fear though whether or not it was because of Naruto's warning or his smile was anyone's guess. Anyway, we better get moving. It won't be long before every thug in these ruins decide to retaliate after our little display. Sasuke pointed out. They made it to the ruins, and right away they were ambushed by another 10 bandits, which they managed to overpower. The group ventured in, getting deep enough that they could find somewhere safe to bunker for a bit and rest up. Shikamaru wondered if Naruto had perhaps overestimated the strength of those inhabiting the island given how effectively they had powered through all the threats. Unfortunately for him and the others, other problems to come wouldn't be so exaggerated. 2 weeks later. To say that Naruto's teammates had a hard time surviving on this island was an understatement. It had been hell on earth for the 3 young shinobi. What really surprised them, however, was how Naruto shrugged off the dangers of this island like it was nothing to him. It was enough to make the 3 Konoha nin wonder whether or not Naruto really had been in hell for 7 years. Neji, Sasuke, have you guys picked up anything yet? Naruto asked as the group walked through a plateau within the Uzu no Seabone. They had earlier detected what appeared to be residual chakra, and they were following it in hopes it had been left by Kazuko. Neji merely shook his head while Sasuke sighed. Nothing yet except that weird trail of residual chakra that we've been tracking for the past few days. Sasuke began with a great deal of frustration in his voice. Before Sasuke could say anything else, however, he looked over the edge of the PH Neji and Naruto, was surprised to see that the trail led to a large cave and, unlike the other underground areas the trail led to, it didn't come out. This brought a smirk to the Uchiha's face, though it appears that's about to change real soon. After another 30 minutes of trekking the team of young ninja finally reached the mouth of the cave and, as they had expected, the source of the residual chakra was clearly within the cave. It was also a very large source as the amount of chakra coming from the mystery person was massive, easily the level of a cage. Unfortunately, while this made it more likely that it was Kazuko that dwelled within the cave, it also meant that the person inside, whether it was Kazuko or not, could easily crush Sasuke, Neji, and Shikamaru should they choose to fight. Naruto could fight back, but the terrain meant that if a member of his team got seriously hurt it would be next to impossible to get them help with any meaningful haste. So Naruto knew that he had to proceed with extreme caution as he got his teammates together. Alright guys, listen up. There's someone inside at that cave who might be our objective. Unfortunately the person is not only very strong but, based on what I saw with my pesquisa, this person has detected our presence and is ready to ambush us once we come within their line of sight. So we'll be entering according to our plan. Do you guys understand? Naruto asked, to which his teammates responded with a simple yes or a nod. Naruto's plan, which he had explained to his team during their trek towards the cave, was rather simple. As Naruto was the strongest of the group he would enter the cave first and would counter the person's ambush. If the hider in question was Kazuko, he would try to reason with her. Sasuke and Shikamaru would be 20 yards behind Naruto in order to avoid having the two get caught in the initial scuffle, after which they would provide the Uzumaki with support if the fight got drawn out. If the person was indeed their objective, Sasuke would also go to Naruto's side after the initial scuffle with Kazuko in order to help convince her to return to Konoha peacefully if she was unwilling to do so. Finally Neji, due to the sensory capabilities of his Byakugan, would stay back at the mouth of the cave in order to detect any approaching dangers, and if something came that appeared to be above his level Neji was to enter the cave and warn the rest of the team. Now that his teammates were ready Naruto slowly entered the cave after using his pesquisa to detect any potential traps that the person might have set. Thankfully, there were none. The mouth of the cave led to a long pitch-black corridor that reduced visibility to near zero for the young Uzumaki, forcing him to proceed with extreme caution. The smell of smoke came to him, and after a few minutes of walking through the dark passageway Naruto saw the faint light of a fire right where the person was located several yards ahead of him. After going back to Shikamaru and Sasuke to make sure that they waited for the right moment, he silently walked into said chamber while keeping himself on high alert. Even with only a few small campfires that were spread about to light it up, it was still clear that this chamber was massive. Naruto guessed that the cavern, which had a massive dome-like ceiling, was at least half of the size of the Dome of Las Noches. Despite the chamber's size, however, Naruto didn't have to go too far inside as he was less than 10 yards inside of the chamber before he detected some movement with his normal Pesquisa which he could use on the move unlike with his special variant. As he had expected, the person was hiding above the entryway to the chamber and was now about to attack him from behind. Naruto, who was too close to the person to block their attack in time with his sword, quickly turned around and held both of his arms up just in time to block what appeared to be the blade of a naginata with the gauntlets that came with his outfit. After a few seconds of silence, the mystery person, whose form was hidden by the darkness of the cavern, Naruto's own body shadowed theirs from the light of the campfire, wielding the naginata, finally spoke. "You're not bad, kid. That's the first time anyone's managed to block my first strike," they said in what was clearly the voice of a young adult female. Naruto simply smirked as he pushed the attack back. "There's a reason why I was tasked to lead a team to find and bring you back to Konoha. Kazuko Uchiha." He stepped slightly to his right, allowing the light from the campfire to reveal Kazuko with her weapon poised for battle and her Sharingan activated. Normally I would question the fact that Konoha would charge a young boy to come after me. In this case, however, I can see why they would send someone like you. The question I have is why Konoha has sent you? Kazuko asked curiously, circling the young Chunin in a counterclockwise direction. Naruto countered by circling to his right, creating a sort of spinning standoff between them. When the passageway out was to his back, he pulled out what appeared to be a letter from the right pocket of his pants. "This is a letter from Tsunade, the Godem Hokage. As far as I know, what the letter says is in your interest to read." Kazuko blinked in surprise at this but did not lose her pace. "Godem? What happened to Minato-sama? I guess you wouldn't know about what has been happening all this time, would you? Where to begin?" Naruto gave the Uchiha a brief overview of the events that had occurred since Kazuko had left Konoha. This included both Kurama's attack on the village as well as the Uchiha clan massacre. Naruto was especially careful in how he explained the massacre to her. Even though the clan was responsible for her exile, they were still her family. As luck would have it, Kazuko wasn't too fond of her family. So it finally happened. "I had always known that our clan's hatred would catch up to it sooner or later. Anyway, let me see that letter. My name is Naruto Uzumaki," he introduced as he handed her the letter. "Uzumaki, so you're Minato-sama's and Kushina-sama's son. That explains a lot," Kazuko said before she read it the letter, moving closer to the campfire to read better. "How could you figure that out when 12 years weren't enough for others to figure it out?" Naruto couldn't help but ask. "I was aware Kushina-sama was pregnant and who the father was. It's not hard to figure out," the Uchiha woman replied without taking her eyes off the letter. "So either a lot of people didn't know, or those that did know didn't care," the whiskered blonde thought, displeased with the memories of his past mistreatment. Some fearful ignorance was pardonable, but there was no way Kazuko was the only one who could have put two and two together before Aizen came for him. How many people knew, or even suspected, the truth of Naruto's origins and kept their mouths shut? Kazuko sighed after she finished reading, forcing him to halt that train of thought for now. "Before I give you my answer to this letter, may I ask you something else?" The young Uzumaki nodded. "Were there any survivors?" The sound of footsteps started echoing from the passageway, and after a few seconds Sasuke, Shikamaru, and Neji appeared at the entrance to the corridor. Kazuko quickly eyed the younger Uchiha in particular. "I guess that answers that question. Naruto. The Akatsuki are heading this way," Sasuke warned cryptically. Naruto sighed. "Already? They work fast." He focused on Kazuko. "I think it would be for the best to leave this cavern now. You can give us your answer on whether or not you'll accept the pardon after we've dealt with the clowns outside. Lead the way, boy," Kazuko said as she motioned towards the dark corridor. Naruto, with both his team and Kazuko following close behind him, ran through the passageway to the exit. It took less than a minute of running through the corridor before the group finally reached the exit. The sight that greeted them was about what they had expected. There were 4 people standing in front of the group. 2 of them wore Akatsuki cloaks while the other 2 wore simple black hooded cloaks. Naruto only briefly took note of the ones with the Akatsuki. One was a man who hid himself behind some sort of hunchback puppet with a tail-like appendage, and the other was a man with a somewhat effeminate appearance who wore his blonde hair in a way that, on Naruto's mind, made him look way too similar to Ino. As for the other 2 figures, in addition to their cloaks, both figures wore masks. One wore a yellow-orange mask with unusual black markings while the other wore an orange spiral mask. The most unusual aspect of the masks, however, was the fact that they both only had one eye hole. As Naruto narrowed his eyes at the 2 masked figures, particularly the one with the marked mask, he also took note at Sasuke glaring at the 2 figures with his Sharingan active and a great deal of anger in his eyes. This battle may be more challenging than the previous 2 weeks of the mission put together. Uzu no Sibon. For several moments that spanned anywhere from seconds to minutes, Naruto's group and the Akatsuki merely stood before the entrance to the cave that Kazuko had been hiding out in. Neither side said anything or did anything, yet at any indication, both could spring into action. The dead silence was only broken when the man with the marked mask spoke up, eyes gazing at the blonde Uzumaki. "So you're Naruto Uzumaki. You've been quite the thorn in our side, haven't you?" he asked rhetorically. "It's only fair, considering what you did to me and my parents. Did you expect me to give you a fruit basket or something?" Naruto retorted as he gripped the hilt of his Zanpakuto in case this guy tried to make a move on him or his team. Before the masked man could respond in return, the blonde-haired Akatsuki member entered the conversation. "So you're the Gaki who killed Orochimaru? Not cool, kid. I wanted to be the one who defeated that snake, and you just had to take that from me, Naruto shrugged. "You snooze you lose, man. I didn't see any, reserved for Iwa Blondie, sign on him when I cut his head off." Did Naruto of all people just make a blonde joke? Neji asked himself. The young Uzumaki's taunt appeared to work as Deidara began to clench his teeth in anger. "Why you little," he began as he reached into his robe. Seeing this, Sasuke and the rest of Naruto's team tensed up, unsure what to expect, while the man with the spiral mask appeared to panic. Strangely, in an almost childish manner, Obito ran up to Deidara from behind and grabbed both his arms, restraining the former Iwa Nen. "Please don't do it, Deidara-senpai. We're supposed to bring back Kazuko alive. Remember? And besides, Madara-sama is right next to us. Do you really want to make him mad?" The spiral masked man pleaded with a childish voice that would have made this scene a bit comical if it was happening anywhere else. Deidara, now focusing his anger on Obito, tried to break free from his grip until the person with the marked mask, who was presumably the Madara that his compatriot was referring to, calmly walked up to them and separated the two. "That's enough from the both of you, in case the two of you hadn't noticed our guests are waiting," Madara began, then turns to the puppeteering member of Akatsuki. "Sasori, be prepared to." Before Madara could finish his sentence, Naruto flash-stepped in front of him and Tobi. Once close enough, he swiftly drew his Zanpakuto in an attempt to bifurcate the two masked men. Only to completely pass right through their bodies as if they were only apparitions. Sasuke and the rest of Naruto's peers were surprised by this, yet both Kazuko and Naruto were more unfazed than surprised. "Thought so, though I was hoping to be wrong," Naruto mused, flash-stepping back to where his group was. "Looks like defeating you will take a little more effort than it took to beat all of your lackeys so far." "That was way too close, wasn't it, Madara-sama?" Another split second and the Kyuubi Jinchuriki would have cut the two of us in half, Tobi noted in a tone that had a twinge of fear emanating from it. "Indeed, Tobi." Madara nodded, turning towards the whiskered blonde. "Naruto, Naruto, Naruto. Only a few minutes after we've met and you've already lived up to your growing reputation so far. Feel flattered, it's not often someone impresses me so quickly. Now why don't we see how strong you truly are?" Naruto, while more than willing to fight Madara as far away from his teammates as possible, had to be sure he could leave his teammates to deal with the other Akatsuki members. "Kazuko," he started. "Yes, I know we've only just met right now, but could you please help my teammates fight those other two Akatsuki members?" Naruto asked while directing the Uchiha's attention to Deidara and the Akatsuki member hidden inside the hunchback puppet. Kazuko turned her gaze towards the Akatsuki, and then to Naruto's teammates before she let out a deep sigh. "Less than 5 minutes after you show up and I'm already in the middle of a fight. Huh? I suppose it can't be helped. There is no way that I'll ever join any organization that threatens Konoha. Especially one with him in it." She narrowed her eyes towards Madara. "Count me in." "Thank you, Kazuko-san," Naruto replied, turning his attention back towards Madara and Tobi. "You want to see how strong I am? Alright, but let's take it elsewhere. After all, you want me to go all out with no reason to hold back, don't you?" He said it as if it were a challenge and a taunt at the same time, like he was insinuating the most infamous Uchiha of all was afraid of him and needed some kind of advantage here. "After you, Uzumaki," Madara said in a mocking tone, covering up the fact he caught the insinuation and was looking forward to proving it wrong. Naruto, without saying another word, sent a glare towards Sasuke to remind him not to get involved. Then flash-stepped to an unknown location on the island. Right away Madara and Tobi seemed to sink into the ground and simply vanish like a drowned victim. "I hope Naruto-san knows what he's doing," Neji muttered after a few moments of tense silence. "I'm not worried about Naruto, there's no way he would ever lose to someone like that," Sasuke said rather calmly. He was somehow able to keep his rising anger towards Madara in check despite knowing what the man had been responsible for. Not to mention Naruto's intimidating glares and warnings certainly made it much easier for the Uchiha to suppress his own rage and let someone else fight for once. Before anyone else in Naruto's group could say anything else, however, they were forced to dodge an thrusting attack from the now named Sasori, forcing them to focus on fighting their own battle. With Naruto. After a few minutes of flash-stepping, Naruto finally reached his destination. The summit of a very large plateau several miles to the east of where Kazuko and the rest of his team would be fighting Deidara and Sasori. Madara and Tobi reached the plateau several minutes later, with both shinobi emerging from the ground. My, you're a real fast one, Naruto-san," Tobi praised. The attempt at flattery only earned him a harsh glare from the young Uzumaki, causing an intimidated Tobi to run back to Madara and hide behind his master in fear. Madara sighed at his protege's antics before he whispered something into Tobi's ears. Tobi nodded in response to whatever Madara said before vanishing into the ground. Madara Uchiha then turned his attention back to Naruto. It seems you're full of surprises, Naruto Uzumaki. I haven't seen someone as skilled as you are in a very long time. Naruto smirked at this comment. I'm guessing that you're referring to either Hashirama, my dad, or maybe even your sensei. Madara showed no visible reaction to the first part of Naruto's comment, but the ending part of said comment was a different manner entirely. Even hidden behind his mask, Naruto could see that Madara's right eye, which had already changed to his Sharingan, had widened in shock. The Uchiha then closed his left hand into a fist. What did you just say? Naruto scoffed. You heard me the first time, but I guess I didn't make myself clear enough. He paused to clear his throat. I know who you really are, and you're definitely not the true Uchiha Madara. You're just his student, one who's simply borrowing his name. I haven't told anyone your identity just yet, and I won't do it until the time is right. I also won't explain how I know your identity because there's no point in doing so. Oh, and why is that? The fake Madara asked, barely able to contain his growing rage. Naruto unsheathed his Zanpakuto, having sheathed his blade after his first attempt to strike down Madara and Tobi. Isn't it obvious? It's because you're going to die here and now, by my blade. Before Madara could respond to Naruto's threat, the young Chunin Flash stepped right behind the masked man, who was barely able to turn himself transparent in time to avoid getting bisected. The fake Madara hundreds of yards away from his opponent before he formed a hand seal in midair. Fire style. Bomb blast dance jutsu. Madara yelled as a massive stream of flames in the form of a spiraling vortex shot out of his mouth, despite the fact that he still wore his mask. Naruto sighed at this display. Bakudo number 81. Denku. Right in front of him, a transparent rectangular wall materialized in front of him. Madara, having landed back on the plateau now, watched in shock as his attack was stopped dead in its tracks by this barrier, with the boy behind it looking unfazed by his jutsu. Is that your best? Madara really did a crappy job training you if it is, Naruto taunted. The fake Madara's visible right eye narrowed at Naruto as the young Chunin pointed the tip of his blade at him. Anyways, you had your shot, now it's my turn. Hyoga Seirin.
From his Zanpakuto, a massive wave of ice was fired at his opponent. It looked like a tidal wave and avalanche at the same time. What kind of attack is that? Madara thought to himself as the wall of ice closed in on him. As with Naruto's previous attacks, Madara was barely able to evade the attack, but instead of turning transparent as he had before, he made the much more simple choice of simply moving out of the way. Before the fake Madara could shift his focus away from the wave of ice, Naruto Flash stepped to the masked man and, with one quick swing of his blade, cut off the man's left arm before the fake Madara could see him with his Sharingan. The resulting scream echoed over the landscape. Despite the pain caused from losing one of his limbs, Madara was able to turn the rest of his body transparent before Naruto could do further damage to him. The masked man then used some sort of space-time ninjutsu to create some needed distance between himself and the young Uzumaki, while a white ooze emerged from the stump of his arm, causing the profuse bleeding from the wound to stop. What's wrong? I haven't even gone all out yet. Naruto taunted as he prepared for another attack. Before the Chunin could make his move, however, Tobi appeared right beside Madara. Sorry I took so long, Shisho. Deidara and Sasori were really taking a beating from Kazuko and the others, more than I thought them capable of. We were barely able to get away from them and reach our hideout. Tobi said in a cheerful tone that caused alarm bells to ring in Naruto's mind. That is of little consequence right now, Tobi, we'll deal with Kazuko and the others soon enough anyways. Did you bring the item I asked for? Madara asked.
Tobi nodded before reaching into his cloak and pulling out a scroll. Naruto recognized what it was right from his first glance at the object, as did Kurama. That masked bastard must be desperate if he's willing to use that. What do you plan to do now, Naruto?
I haven't used that trick in a while, Kurama. I think this is as good time as any to use it. Naruto could almost feel Kurama grin in excitement despite the lack of any physical mouth at the present. He refocused his attention to Madara and his lackey as the former grabbed the mystery scroll. You've managed to surpass my expectations, Gaki, I give you that much. But as much as I'd like to find out your limits, I don't have time to play games with the likes of you. Let's see how you deal with this. Madara declared as he opened the scroll, revealing that it was a sum contract for some unknown creature, and placed it on the floor.
After making a few hand seals, the fake Madara then slammed the palm of his right arm on the seal of the sum jutsu, which already had a few drops of blood placed on it.
Sum jutsu. Madara yelled out before he and Tobi were both enveloped by a massive cloud of smoke. Tobi was the first to exit the smoke, looking like he wanted to make some cheesy introduction for the creature that just appeared.
Ta-da! Introducing my Shishuo's main summon and one of the most terrifying beings known to man. Other than the Biju. It's the one. The only. Gedo Mazo. The smoke cleared, and standing behind the fake Madara was something that looked like some sort of massive, humanoid, statue-like monster that had been decaying for quite some time but still wasn't done yet. It stood several stories tall, was a pale shaded purple color, and had multiple spike-like protrusions sticking out of its back like a plant-based porcupine. It appeared to wearing some sort of robe and was shackled, with broken chains attached to the bindings, on its arms and ankles. For some reason the creature was wearing a blindfold and had a large metal rod sticking out of its midsection. The massive creature, whether by Madara's design or not, let out a massive roar that appeared to cause the very ground on which it stood to shake violently. And what was Naruto's response to the monstrosity standing before him? "That's it? Your grand plan to defeat me is to bring a toy into battle?" Naruto asked with a bored expression now etched onto his face. "It's Naruto, did you expect him to be intimidated by this thing? A toy, you say? Do you really think you can defeat my summons so easily?" Madara challenged as if he had already won the battle and the whiskered blonde just didn't know it yet. "I know I can beat that plaything, even if you and that idiot you call a lackey join the fray." That being said, Naruto began, pointing his Zanpakuto at the two masked men. Then he redirected the tip of his blade to the ground as if he was about to release his Zanpakuto. Unlike with his previous releases however, Naruto held his outstretched right arm, sword in hand, in front of him instead of to his side.
I think it'll be more interesting to have him fight that chew toy instead. Oh, and don't even bother trying to control him with your Sharingan because it's not going to work this time.
Madara and Toba's eyes widened in shock upon realizing what Naruto was about to do. "He can't be serious, Shisho," Tobi stated. Madara, in turn, had nothing to reply with. "Devastate, Kurama. Kyubi Kachiyuse," Naruto yelled out. As soon as the release command was given, the blade began to emit a massive blood-red aura while the red wrappings around the hilt disintegrated even as Naruto held onto his Zanpakuto. The red aura began to expand beyond the blade until it had enveloped Naruto and most of the plateau on which he stood. Watching this, Tobi and his master, the latter to a lesser extent, both felt their hearts drop when they heard an all-too-familiar roar.
"Ah, run for your lives. It's the Kyuubi. He'll eat us alive." Tobi yelled as he ran away, tripping over himself in his panic a couple of times in the process. Madara, having already planned for Tobi to withdraw once he had summoned the Gedo Mazo, paid no heed to his assistant's childish retreat. So Naruto had somehow gained the ability to summon the fox from within himself. He thought, taking this new reality in. While the sight of the massive kitsune alone was enough to shock the fake Madara, it wasn't the only shocker. The Kyuubi's back to full size. Did it somehow regain the half of its chakra that Minato-sensei sealed away? Naruto could be seen hovering, or more like standing on the air, beside the tailed beast that normally dwelt within him. He held his Zanpakuto, which he still wielded even after some kurama, and directed it at his masked opponent. "I can tell that you take great pride in that empty shell of a summon. Kurama, and I will tear that pride apart, piece by painful piece." Uzu no Seabone. Naruto's teammates kept their focus on the tail-like appendage that Sasori had nearly used to skewer them. At the same time, Kazuko, who had already activated her Sharingan, kept a close eye on Deidara after he created a giant bird out of white clay that he kept in two pouches latched onto. His bird was incredibly generic in shape, bearing no resemblance to any specific species, though if one had to call it something the most likely answer would be either a pigeon or a dove. Deidara got on the bird's back and had it fly around 50 yards away, despite there being no natural way for such a construct to be aerodynamic. At least it was kept at a low altitude, but still enough to stay out of everyone's reach and give it time to avoid many jutsu. He looked very confident in his high ground, his hands were in his pouches like he would ready more clay before they could start any attack on him. "Don't do it, Deidara," Sasori warned. "You'll just play right into her hands." His eyes gestured towards Kazuko. Deidara did not heed the words of the former Sunanen, though whether it's because he didn't hear his partner's warnings or he simply refused to heed them was anyone's guess. His focus was on both Kazuko and Sasuke. "Two Sharingans, huh? This is a perfect opportunity to finally prove the superiority of my art, Deidara withdrew his hands from the pouches. Sasuke and the others were surprised when they saw two mouths, one on the palms of both hands, spit out a glob of white clay. In doing so they could see human teeth and a tongue. Those portions of clay now have chakra kneaded into them. What is that man up to? Neji thought to himself as he observed Deidara's jutsu with his Byakugan. Deidara was now grinning at Sasuke and the others as he closed both hands for a few seconds, keeping them separate. When the former Iwanden opened his hands, he revealed that he had somehow molded the clay into 10 small clay birds, 5 in each hand. It would have been a very impressive display of artistic dexterity if it weren't done by someone whose hands needed a dental plan. "Let's start off with some C1, Deidara said excitedly. The former terrorist for hire threw the 10 clay birds,
the wings of which spread open once in midair. Like some sort of homing missiles, the birds charged right past Kazuko and towards Sasuke, Shikamaru, and Neji. The three boys were surprised and tried to dodge the projectiles, but this proved to be in vain because said projectiles simply followed them around. Neji acted the fastest and begun a rotation, protecting himself but not the others, who were stuck relied on dodging. Sasuke took out a kunai but Shikamaru grabbed his wrist. We don't know what will happen if you counter it directly. What could Clay? Sasuke protested, pausing to duck under a projectile, possibly do. This is the beauty of my art, Deidara exclaimed, excited. He got his left hand ready for a hand seal, unaware that below him Kazuko was making a few hand signs of her own. And art is an explosion.
Triggered by their maker, the clay birds suddenly swelled up before they all exploded. 6 of the ceramic bombs blew up next to Shikamaru and Neji, 3 for each genin, while Sasuke had 4 of the bombs detonate in front of him. Dust clouds obscured them from view, making it impossible to tell from the outside if any were still alive.
Okay, apparently it can do that, Sasuke noted grimly.
Deidara on the other hand began laughing, reveling in apparent victory. Ha 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 ha. So much for Itachi's kid brother and those 2 other brats, They couldn't even withstand. While Deidara congratulated himself, the dust clouds started to dissipate. The blonde bomber's eyes widened in shock when he got a good look at the sight of the explosions. Instead of seeing the mutilated and torn corpses of the young Leaf Nin, Deidara saw 3 alive and unharmed kids.
How? He started, only then did he take notice that Sasuke, Shikamaru, and Neji were surrounded by 4 mirrors. Mirrors made of solid ice. Sasuke was also surprised by this turn of events and didn't notice that the ice mirrors had dissipated in that shock. Isn't this the same jutsu that was used against me back in Wave? Sasuke asked, seeing the mirrors crack and shatter now in a sort of delayed reaction to the explosion. How is this possible?
Interesting. Kazuko thought out loud. So you've managed to combine the explosive style with an earth-style jutsu and that strange forbidden jutsu from Iwagakure. The one that allows a shinobi to turn inanimate matter into animate matter for a temporary time. All things considered, that is a very impressive combination, even if it's a bit too flashy in its execution.
Deidara looked down at her, taken aback by what she said. How the hell did she figure that out so quickly? There's no way.
Kazuko quickly planted her naginata in the ground at an angle, then in a display of great agility and leg strength, she jumped into the air, swiftly closing the distance between herself and the blonde artist. She managed to grasp onto the underbelly of Deidara's large white bird even though the clay construct was still 4 stories above the ground. Deidara couldn't see what she was doing from his side, but he was concerned. One wrong move and they could both blow up, and Deidara wasn't yet ready to be that much at one with his art.
Kazuko held her grip but reared back her left fist. Explosive style. Landmine fist jutsu. The Konoha nin looked on in shock as Kazuko threw a left jab at the clay bird's stomach. The punch caused a massive explosion directed right at both the bird and the blonde missing nin. And as to be expected, this caused the clay bird to detonate as well, blowing up right under Deidara's feet and propelling him upwards. Kazuko was naturally propelled downwards. She spun in the air and at the right moment reached for her naginata, swinging on it to divert some momentum and slightly cushion her landing. It was still a rough landing, but one she could walk away from. And any landing you can walk away from is a good landing. I don't think I've ever seen any uchiha do something like that before, Sasuke thought, not sure how to feel about what he had just witnessed. If I didn't have a Byakugan, I wouldn't have believed what I just saw. Neji contemplated, tempted to rub his eyes in disbelief. This woman is a complete wild card. Truly unpredictable, just like Naruto. I don't know if I can handle 2 of them, Shikamaru worried. The female Uchiha retrieved her weapon from the ground and rejoined the members of Naruto's team. Unless the 3 of you wish to meet your ends here, I suggest that you try to be more careful next time. That mad bomber isn't dead yet and I can't shield you 3 all the time. Shield us? So you were the one who created those ice mirrors? Neji asked.
Who else would have done it? Him, Kazuko asked back, her gaze on Sasori who was sitting back observing the situation, likely now trying to plan around her current display of talents.
But that's not possible. I've seen that exact jutsu before and it's a keke genkai. There's no way you could know it, Sasuke argued. Kazuko sighed at her fellow clansman's skepticism. Under normal circumstances that would be correct, Sasuke-san. But these aren't normal circumstances. You'll have to wait for explanations later, the fight is not over. The 3 preteens turned to see what Kazuko was looking at and were surprised to see Deidara standing next to Sasori. While the bomber was still standing, he did not escape the explosions unscathed. His akatsuki cloak was gone, presumably torn apart in the blasts, and the man himself was sporting several burns along with a dislocated left shoulder with his left forearm visibly incinerated. Naturally Deidara was less than pleased, to say the very least. Damn you, how the fucking hell did you copy my keke genkai, To the blonde's surprise Sasori was the one to answer that question. She didn't copy you, you fool. She had already copied it from another Iwanoha. Maybe now you'll listen to me when I try to warn you. He then turned towards Kazuko. It would appear that you still live up to your reputation, Kazuko Uchiha, the bloodline thief. Sasuke, Shikamaru, and Neji turned towards the older Uchiha, herself keeping an eye on the Akatsuki members.
It's an old nickname people gave me before I was forced to leave Konoha. I got the name because I'm the only Uchiha whose Sharingan is able to copy Kekkei Genkai Jutsu despite not having the Kekkei Genkai itself. I was able to master all 5 of the basic chakra natures in about a year, so I combined that with my Sharingan's enhanced copy ability, hence my unique ability. I can't copy things like physical effects, for example other dujutsu, so there are limits.
She can copy the jutsu of Kekkei Genkai without needing the bloodline itself. Sasuke asked himself. If that's true, then no wonder the Akatsuki want her in their ranks. That ability would be very advantageous to have since she could be capable of nearly anything. But then why would Konoha let her go? Just as Kazuko finished her explanation, she spun her naginata, blocking a surprise attack from Sasori. I think those guys have had enough of letting us talk, Shikamaru suggested, prompting the 3 of them to take their respective fighting stances. Yes, we have. Sasori hissed, lifting his arm and having some kunai fire out of a hidden compartment built within. Kazuko spun her naginata to stop the weapons, then jumped at the puppeteer. The 3 preteens chose to gang up on Deidara since he was visibly the weakest.
I beat you once 14 years ago, Sasori, I can do it again. The Uchiha clanswoman claimed, swinging her weapon at him. Though he blocked it with his scorpion tail. Much can change in 14 years, woman. Sasori warned, bringing out 2 puppets to defend himself. One looked like a man literally made of blades of various sizes, and the other looked like a string of featureless glass orbs connected to each other, though each orb was filled with a visible liquid. Kazuko was certain she did not want that stuff to get out of its container.
Magma style. Lava shot jutsu. Kazuko spat out several globs of magma at the glass containers, hoping that the chemicals inside would not have a reaction to the heat. The lava made contact and shattered the glass, with a sizzling sound and some steam resulting, but nothing else. Though the rest of the puppet remained. Sasori winced but didn't show it. Last time he fought Kazuko, she had used that same jutsu to give the Hiriko puppet some serious damage that took him quite a while to repair.
Puppets weren't exactly lava-proof, especially ones that used to be made out of people. He sent both puppets at her, intending for one to cut her and the other to restrain or distract her. Kazuko went on the defensive, her naginata not as effective against the bladed puppet, and she was going to evade the glass one, trying to wrap itself around it as much as possible without breaking it in her vicinity.
As this was going on, Deidara fought back against Naruto's teammates, but in his current state his common sense was being hampered by his anger, and his fighting capacity was diminished by his injuries.
So it wasn't that hard for a Juken user, a talented if somewhat overhyped Uchiha, and a strategic shadow user to collectively back the injured former Iwa Nin into a corner. In doing so they could hear a rather audible snap and Deidara have a harder time standing. If the battle had continued on as it was, Deidara would have met his untimely demise, keyword being, if.
Before either of the battles could continue, a man suddenly appeared out of nowhere.
It was Tobi, the man with the spiral mask who had gone up to confront Naruto alongside the other masked man. This appearance surprised everyone and forced a brief pause to the fights, giving Tobi the opportunity to involve Deidara and Sasori in some sort of unknown teleportation technique. It looked like a rippling of the air and bending of light, resulting in the disappearance of the masked man and the duo of self-proclaimed artists, leaving Kazuko and the preteen ninja to their own devices.
Is this good for us, or bad? Sasuke asked. A little of both, leaning towards the latter. Shikamaru groaned. If you got the energy to complain, then you got the energy to help out your other comrade. You shouldn't leave him hanging, Kazuko informed them. The 3 boys looked at each other, all wondering if Naruto really needed their help after all. For all they knew, he was already done with his fight. Still, might as well see just so no one could accuse them of abandoning him later. The group had to go over the top of a ridge that went parallel to the valley they had just came from, and when they got there they got a good view of the battle occurring 10 or so miles from their current location. From that distance they could see a statue-like creature with the man with the marked mask atop of. And opposing it was the 9-tailed fox itself, with Naruto floating beside the Biju. That's not a genjutsu, that's definitely the Kyuubi. Neji asked, gulping for a second. Did Naruto actually summon it?
Sasuke sighed at this, remembering how Naruto had explained to Team 7 the nature of his, ability. This fight's over. Even that thing can't last long against the Kyuubi.
Not to burst anyone's bubble, but what are we going to do now? Shikamaru asked. Everyone suddenly realized what he meant. They were standing in an exposed area, with a real-life kaiju battle about to begin only 10 miles away from them. As the fake Madara looked on in obvious shock, even with his mask hiding the look on his face, Naruto turned to his tailed beast, Zanpakuto. Do what you like with the doll, Kurama, but take it somewhere else. The masked bastard is mine. Kurama simply grinned at this. Fine by me. He should be thankful that you're the one who's going to kill him and not me. Kurama charged at the Gedo Mazo, accidentally flattening a few small mountains with his tails as he closed in on his prey. The fake Madara was able to snap himself out of his shock in time to respond to Kurama's initial assault, ordering the Gedo Mazo to retaliate against the gigantic vulpine. As Madara did this, however, he almost failed to notice Naruto flash-stepping right behind him and was barely able to turn transparent before the young Uzumaki namikaze clansman could run his sword through the masked man's heart. You do realize that without any of the Biju sealed inside it, that little toy of yours doesn't stand a chance against an actual Biju, right? Naruto asked as he completely phased through Madara, flash-stepping back 10 yards away from his opponent. Do you really think you can stop me so easily, Uzumaki? The fake Madara asked. As if to respond to Madara's question, the Gedo Mazo was sent flying back at least 40 miles away by Kurama, who smacked the summon with a swipe of his claws. Both ninja took a moment to pause and looked at the battle of giants, with one feeling secure in his confidence and the other's own wavering a little. Kurama, in an impressive display of speed, closed the distance between himself and the Gedo Mazo before using his left paw to grab the strange summon and push it deeper into the ground. Kurama then began running on its 3 other legs while he kept his grip on the fake Madara's summon, dragging the summon for another 50 miles, leveling terrain and another mountain as he did so. Then the Biju mustered all of his strength and threw the creature high up into air. Keeping up with his attack, Kurama then jumped above the Gedo Mazo while the latter was still in midair, getting on top of the statue-like creature and driving it into the ground. The resulting impact leveled several other nearby mountains in the process and created a gust of wind that nearly knocked everyone off their feet. Kurama, who was now using his massive size to keep the Gedo Mazo pinned to the ground, then cocked his head upwards and opened his mouth before he began creative of Ryotsu. When he finished creating the massive attack, Kurama compressed the orb into a dense sphere before he ate said sphere. A few seconds after ingesting the orb, Kurama's mouth began bloating while steam seeped out of the fox's mouth through the gaps between his bared teeth. He got into position where he could face the struggling Gedo Mazo. "It's over," Kurama yelled out as he released the attack he had devoured in the form of a massive beam, hitting the Gedo Mazo at point-blank range, causing a massive explosion that engulfed both summons. Uzu no Seabone. As the explosion caused by Kurama's attack rocked the surrounding area, Madara looked on at the battle of giants in complete shock. The Gedo Mazo currently had none of the Biju inside it yet due to Akatsuki decided to start with Kyuubi the strongest and work their way down. But even with that disadvantage, the fake Madara did not expect the statue to be defeated so easily. Then again, he also never imagined that Naruto would manifest the Kyuubi from within himself like some sort of summon and have it fight for itself. Such power. Damn it, Minato-sensei, why did you have to seal the Kyuubi inside of that gaki? Madara thought to himself as the blast finally began to subside. The sight that emerged from the thinning debris and smoke was not encouraging for the masked man. Kurama stood victorious, completely undamaged from the power of his own attack, one of his clawed hand-like paws grasping the defeated Gedo Mazo by the head. The humanoid entity now sporting a massive hole in its torso, one more fitting to be found on a Manos Grande than a living creature, if the Gezo Mado could in fact be considered a living creature. The giant fox, using a great deal of strength and now both hands, threw the heavily damaged statue-like summon to the side like he was trying to get it out of his way. The Gedo Mazo collapsed to the ground with all the finesse of a sack filled with rocks and hammers. To the surprise of Kurama, once on the ground the damaged Gedo Mazo suddenly poofed and, after the cloud of smoke had dissipated, had vanished into thin air. "Sorry Kyuubi, but I can't allow you to destroy the Gedo Mazo. For you and the other Biju are still destined to become one again with it," and the fake Madara began taunting now that he felt he could turn this around. But he was interrupted when in a blink Naruto appeared before him, slashing at him with his Zanpakuto. Madara had no time to act on anything other than sheer reflex, which allowed him to turn transparent in order to survive that attack. "So much for your trump card. I guess that means that you've got nothing left," Naruto taunted before he flash-stepped back to on top Kurama. "Was that it?" Kurama asked, to which Naruto nodded. "Unfortunately. Sorry I couldn't summon you for a more interesting opponent. Anyways, I think it's time I ended this battle," Naruto pointed out. "Indeed it is. I'm going back to my nap. Good luck," Kurama said before he was suddenly enveloped by the same blood-red aura that had been emitted when Naruto had summoned him. After a few seconds, Kurama suddenly transformed back into the red wrappings that then wrapped themselves around the hilt of Naruto's sword. Naruto sighed at the fox's comment, but before he could get back to the real opponent, the young Uzumaki, namikaze clansman was forced to dodge Madara, who had tried to sneak around and grab the konoha nin from behind. Naruto jumped away to create some distance between himself and Madara, requiring the latter to consider his options. "I don't know how he got this way, but he's clearly too strong for me to handle like I expected to handle the other jinchuriki I have." To defeat me now before I become even more of a threat? Is that what you're thinking? Naruto asked, seemingly finishing Madara's thoughts. The masked man was clearly shocked by this, his one visible eye widening in surprise. Don't worry, I'm not literally reading your mind if that's what you're thinking. I'm just good at reading people. Like my father was. Naruto smirked. Now's my chance to see if Jinei-sensei was right about who this guy is. Naturally, after taking him in Aizen and the others had been curious to find out more about Naruto and what led to the circumstances that prompted them to take him along. All details led back to the night that Kurama attacked Konoha, and while most reports of that night were vague and nondescript, the classified ones claimed that throughout the night a masked man with a Sharingan had been responsible for the event in question. Jinei, who had been doing the checking, had found no list of suspects to this and immediately knew that was suspicious. A lack of suspects meant either Konoha wasn't taking this threat seriously or they were afraid such a list would be incriminating for some reason. Worst case scenario, the Hokage knew exactly who the masked Uchiha was but kept it secret for some reason. Jinei ignored that and checked the registry of Uchiha to see which were the strongest on record, but that gave him nothing to do off of. Later he wondered if perhaps the attack had a more personal reason, so he went back to check and see if Minato Namikaze had a connection with any Uchiha. One name stood out the most, Obito Uchiha. And while on record he was considered Kia, no actual body had been brought back to the village. Besides, as a Shinigami, Jinei knew that death didn't stop someone from wanting something. But out of all the people capable of influencing Kurama, Obito so far was the one who had most reason to take action. Why and whether he was alive or not were still unknown, but the Shinigami had informed Naruto of this and told him to do with the info whatever he willed to do with it. Now then, the whiskered blonde pointed his Zanpakuto at his opponent. It's time to finish this. With Kazuko and Naruto's team. During the very short and one-sided battle between Kurama and the Gedo Mazo, Naruto's companions along with Kazuko managed to find a small cave to hunker down in. It wasn't roomy but it at least provided them some measure of protection from the devastation occurring all around them. The cave helped more when Kazuko reinforced the walls with some earth jutsus. Several minutes passed, though it felt much longer to the members of Naruto's team, before the ground finally stopped shaking. After the tremors passed, the group waited a bit, then decided to leave the safety of the reinforced cave. Though they would do so slowly, spending several minutes just staring in awe at the carnage caused by the giant monster battle. Once the awe passed, they took a moment to try and sense Naruto's unique not chakra energy presence, something they were familiar with thanks to the Chunin exams and him giving a few details on their way here. After they found it, or rather the direction it was coming from, the shinobi rushed that way in case they needed to come to his aid, though that was extremely unlikely. "Hey, Sasuke. Mind if I ask you something?" Neji spoke up. "Go ahead." The young Uchiha replied. Naruto said that he was gone for 7 years because he was training somewhere all that time, correct? Yes, and your point is? Has Naruto ever told you anything about the person that trained him? Neji asked. Sasuke thought about it for several seconds before shaking his head. No, he's told me and the rest of our team a few things about where he trained, a place he calls Las Noches, but he's refused to tell us anything about his teachers. The rest of group was actually about to accept the Uchiha's response before Shikamaru suddenly realized something. Wait a minute, teachers? As in more than one? Sasuke nodded. Yes, the only thing he has said about his teachers was that he had 13 of them. Of those 13, 3 of them were apparently the ones in charge of this Las Noches place and they left most of Naruto's training to the other 10. That's all know, unfortunately. Was it all at the same time, or one by one? Neji asked. Sasuke paused. Honestly, I'm not completely sure, but with how he described it I always assumed it was at the same time with each having their own specialties. The fact that Naruto trained under 10 or 13 depending on how you interpreted what Sasuke said, took Neji and Shikamaru by surprise. They couldn't name any Junin, present or historical, that had trained under that many teachers simultaneously, not even the Sannin or the Hokages. Naruto was practically overtrained at this point. And that was ignoring the fact that Naruto said Las Noches was a realm of ghosts. Sasuke knew TTTLE detail here would only raise more questions than he could answer. Damn, and I thought I was overpowered. Kazuko noted, having listened to this with great interest. But he's still human, he has to have a weakness. Let's hope whoever he's fighting won't find it, Shikamaru stated, encouraging them to pick up the pace. With Naruto, the fake Madara found himself in dire straits. After several minutes of fighting Naruto, the masked man had been forced to be on the defensive, having to keep his transparency ability activate to avoid certain death. To make matters worse for Madara, the young leaf Chunin that was his opponent somehow knew the secrets behind how his jutsu worked, including the fact that it had a time limit of at least 10 minutes, and used that knowledge to his advantage by refusing to let up his assault. What's the matter? You've already run out of options and have to resort to hiding yourself in that dimension of yours. Naruto taunted as he appeared on Madara's right and attempted to slash at him. Even though he managed to avoid getting cut in two yet again, the fake Madara finally admitted to himself that he had run out of tactics and therefore lost this battle. The only options left were withdraw or die. It was in that moment that the powers that be, having already made Madara's life a living nightmare at this point, had apparently decided to screw him over again at the worst possible time. Because the 10-minute time limit for Madara's only available means of survival had run out. "Looks like you're done," Naruto said, seeing the man look worried, bewildered, and exhausted. "As a reward for having survived the longest out of all of my opponents so far, allow me to finish you off with an attack that I haven't even shown to anyone back in Konoha." "You can't." Naruto stepped away and then pointed the tip of his blade, held only by his right hand, at the Akatsuki mastermind before he channeled a large amount of Riryoku into his blade, which began emitting an aura of orange light. "What is this? What the hell are?" Madara began to ask. That was as far as he got. "Sero Metroletta," Naruto yelled out. Faster than the blink of an eye, the whiskered blonde charged up several orange seros in certain points around the tip of his blade all at once before firing a barrage of the orange beams like a machine gun. The fake Madara, having exceeded the time limit of his space-time jutsu and thus unable to use it for several minutes, was now a sitting duck and was easily overwhelmed by the seemingly endless barrage. After about 2 minutes of non-stop seros, Naruto finally cancelled the attack. Keeping his Zanpakuto in hand in the unlikely event that his opponent could still fight, Naruto slowly approached Madara, who was lying on his back on the ground. Naruto's attack had certainly done its job, as the fake Madara was, to put it lightly, a dismembered mess. The masked man had been cut in half horizontally, the upper part of his body separate from the lower half at the belly. His right arm from the elbow down had disintegrated, as had his left shin and his entire right leg. How the man was still alive was a testament to his willpower. Despite his injuries, however, Madara managed to miraculously maintain consciousness as he glared at Naruto with his one visible eye. The mask, though heavily damaged, did not break, almost like Naruto had intentionally missed that one part. "Damn it. What kind of attack was that?" the fake Madara asked in a weak, hissing way. He sounded like speaking was genuine labor for him right now. His opponent's question made Naruto think back to his time in Las Noches. Flashback, somewhere in Hueco Mundo, 2 years before Naruto's return. Naruto was currently underneath the perpetual night sky of Las Noches. This time around he was training with Coyote Stark, the incredibly lazy yet incredibly powerful first Espada, who had just merged with Lilinet Jinchuriki, and Arrancar also happened to be Stark's Zanpakuto. Though Stark would have preferred to train inside of Las Noches, or, even better to him, not train at all, someone had to teach the young Uzumaki how to use a Sero. Unfortunately for Stark, Seros were his forte among the Espadas, so no one was more qualified than him. In addition, Aizen made it perfectly clear that he had to train the kid while in his resurrección, something that was forbidden for him to do, as well as for Barragan, Harabel, and Ulquiorra. After a few minutes of silence, Stark finally spoke. "Alright, Naruto, Lilinet, let's hurry up and finish this damn training session. I want to go back to bed already," Stark suggested, complained as he pointed one of the 2 pistols that formed part of his resurrección at Naruto, who did the same thing with his blade. "Stark, stop your whining already," an annoyed Lilinet, who had turned into the very pistols was currently wielding, remarked. "Ready when you are, Stark-sama," Naruto yelled out, regaining the duo's attention. As soon as Naruto did so, his blade emitted an orange aura while Stark began emitting a blue aura all around himself, especially around his pistols. "Sero Metroletta," Naruto and Stark yelled out simultaneously before they both unleashed massive barrages of Seros. Blue and orange Seros began colliding with each other as explosions began to cause the ground around the training area to shake violently. It was perfectly obvious that Naruto and Stark's Seros were evenly matched, much to Stark's dismay, since that meant that this session was probably going to be another long one. Stark didn't have any problem with Naruto personally, and in fact had began a close friend of the young ninja, but the Arrancar's trademark laziness meant he wasn't looking forward to this session either way. "And I have to start training this kid to use the Sero Oscuras today as well. This day is really going to be such a pain in the ass," Stark thought to himself as he and Naruto cancelled out their respective Metrolettas so they can ready themselves for another attack. End flashback, Uzu no Seibone. That was the signature attack of one of my teachers, though his version was stronger and has several advantages over mine. That's enough about that, though, Naruto explained before he held his blade at Madara's throat. "Any last words, Obito Uchiha?" Madara blinked. How did you know?" Naruto smirked. "Actually, I didn't. I had a clue, but no way to prove it. Except now you just did, so now you have no surprises left." Obito glared despite his weakened condition. "You think you've won? Do you really think it's that simple to beat me, Gaki? This is not over, not by a long shot." Naruto raised an eyebrow at this, but before he could question Obito on this, said Uchiha was suddenly enveloped by a puff of smoke.
That smoke quickly dissipated to reveal that Obito had been a wood clone fighting Naruto all this time. Hey, I should have seen that coming. That traitor doesn't have the balls to confront me head on, so he sent a clone to gauge my abilities first. Won't do him any good in the end, though. Naruto said to himself as he sheathed his blade. Anyways, I should probably regroup with Sasuke and the others. We still have a long distance to cover in order to get back home, and I'd rather confront that person following me back in Konoha. Naruto thought to himself as he went to rejoin Kazuko and his teammates, fully aware of the mysterious figure that had been tailing him since before he arrived in the land of whirlpools. 100 yards away from Naruto, and several yards above the young Uzumaki, a person was floating in the air. The person's physical appearance was hidden by a black cloak that covered all except for their golden-colored eyes. As the person continued watching Naruto very carefully, they pulled out what appeared to be a cell phone and dialed a number. Soon enough, someone answered them. Hello. Yeah, it's me. The kid is headed back to his village. Yeah, it looks like those rumors are definitely true. He wields the power of both Shinige. He's also the Kyuubi's jinchuriki. Not sure how Aizen was able to convince Sarutobi to let him train under his wing, but it looks as though he did a hell of a job with him. Huh. No, there's no indication that he's aware of Aizen's plans. It must mean Aizen is trying to keep him in check until the time comes. What? Are you sure that's a good idea? This kid already knows that I'm following him and he might not be in a talking mood if I do that. I see. I guess you have a good point. Anyways, I guess I should hang up. If anything happens, just send me a message right away and keep me in the loop. Later, Kazuki. The cloaked person said before hanging up. The unidentified person then noticed Naruto beginning to walk away from the site of his battle and proceeded to tail him, taking care not to be spotted by anyone, except Naruto, as he was already aware of the person's presence.